Good evening and welcome to Iowa News and Views. My name's Joe Balcom. Thanks for joining us. We have a very interesting program tonight on civil liberty issues in Iowa, but before we get to that and introduce our guests, I'd like to tell you about a couple of upcoming shows. Iowa News and Views will be at the Iowa State Fair coming up on August 16th, and we'll be doing a program there with Lieutenant Governor Sally Peterson to talk about some of the issues she's been working on in these first 8 months of the new Vilsack-Peterson administration. We're excited about that. It'll be at the American Heritage Stage on Monday, August 16th at 10:30 a.m. So if you're in the neighborhood, stop by and join us in the audience for that show. We're also working on a couple other shows, one on local food production and how local food producers are getting together with institutional buyers to basically provide Iowa-grown produce in our local communities around the state. We're going to be highlighting a project here in Johnson County, and that'll be coming up in a couple weeks. We're also trying to put together a show on the current farm crisis in Iowa, the low commodity prices, and we hope to bring that to you shortly as well. There's a few items in the news. You know, the presidential politics are beginning to heat up here in Iowa, and we have a solid parade of presidential candidates, both Democrats and Republicans. George Bush Jr. has been in the state, and he has, as you know, been pushing this term compassionate conservative that he is, and we're still trying to figure out what that means. We have an email address, and if you can tell us what a compassionate conservative is, we'd like you to send us your ideas about that, and we'll share those with our viewers as they come in. We think that it's a very curious term, and we'd like to know what you think about it. It seems to me the other thing that we're hearing about, the solution to every problem as Republicans talk about solving problems, is a tax cut. Whether it's crumbling schools, it's a tax cut. Whether it's child care, the way to solve that is give everybody a tax cut. There was a recent poll that indicated that Americans, while everybody generally likes tax cuts, that didn't fare as well in the poll. It showed up as about an issue number 9 about issues that people are concerned with right now. And I think we should challenge our Republican candidates for president to give us a little bit more substance about their positions in the coming weeks and months as they parade around our state and ask for our support. I don't think tax cuts are going to solve all our problems, and it appears that the American people and Iowans don't believe it either. So raise those questions when those candidates come a-knocking. Our guest tonight is Ben Stone, the Executive Director of the Iowa Civil Liberties Union. Ben is also a defense attorney, practicing defense attorney, as well as an instructor of constitutional law at the DMAC campus in Des Moines. Ben, thanks for being with us.
Well, thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Ben, you lead the Iowa Civil Liberties Union. What's the mission of the Iowa Civil Liberties Union here in our state?
Well, the Iowa Civil Liberties Union is concerned with the rights that are found in the Bill of Rights that protect us all, and we concentrate our advocacy efforts on basically the First Amendment and other amendments to the Constitution. We lobby the legislature. We bring cases with our litigation program, and we also have a public education program that we do.
Very good. One major initiative of the American Civil Liberties Union, and I assume the Iowa Civil Liberties Union will be involved with this, is a campaign raising awareness about the issue of driving while black. And for our viewers who have seen previous shows, we've spent a little bit of time on this, and this is the problem that people of color face by being pulled over by law enforcement for essentially being dark-skinned. Tell us a little bit about this initiative.
Well, driving while black has become a prominent issue nationwide, thanks in large part to the efforts of the ACLU. The term refers to, in a kind of derogatory fashion, the driving while black or brown, which kind of emulates the driving while intoxicated crime, real crime. And what we have happening all over this country, and it happens in Iowa as well, are people of color being pulled over by law enforcement under the guise of racial profiling, where law enforcement basically identify people as being more likely to be drug dealers or whatnot, or possessing drugs. And the main component of that is the race of the driver. Some other factors include like driving a rental vehicle from out of state, but it's entirely innocent behavior. And what we have happening is the statistics are showing that this is a tremendous problem. And we've characterized it as the new segregation. It's really profound, and some of the statistics we've been able to compile with ACLU litigation in the rest of the country. In Maryland, for instance, 15% of the drivers in a certain segment of I-95 on the eastern seaboard, 15% of those drivers are black, while 70% of the drivers who are pulled over and searched are black. 70% compared to 15% of the actual people driving down the road. Actual minority people, it's 20%, and 80% of the people that are pulled over and searched are minority. So it's really an amazing phenomenon, and it's really quite detrimental to our system, because people of color particularly are targeted. They are subjected to humiliating searches, and it inconveniences them. It colors their interpretation of the judicial system, and it's something that we all have a strong reason to oppose, because, I mean, if our American system of justice doesn't have color blindness, it's really quite immoral.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that comes to my mind is the whole question of whether this is a component of the war on drugs in America, where we've moved to pulling over people of color in order to feel like we're addressing problems of drug abuse and the like.
Yeah, the war on drugs has had an impact on all of our lives, and the main impact has been increased taxation and a loss of civil liberties and freedoms. It's really a war on civil liberties, and a war on people, and a war on poor people, a war on people of color. You know, the war on drugs is an extremely misguided concept. It doesn't work. Statistics and surveys have shown that it hasn't deterred drug use. Half of the people in crime in our federal prisons for nonviolent offenses are there for marijuana possession, you know, nonviolent crimes. And it's costing not only a tremendous amount of public resources, but when you think about the waste of human potential, when we warehouse, we have the highest per capita prison population in the world. We're going to soon pass the Soviet or the former Soviet Union on that. So it's the amount of injustice that happens to people who are imprisoned for essentially victimless crimes. I mean, simple possession. It's really something that America has got to waken up to, because we're building prisons right and left, and we're spending money that could be better spent on prevention and other programs. And it's frustrating that people don't seem to understand that when their politicians talk about just, you know, every session of the Iowa legislature, basically all they do is they write new crimes and they enhance penalties on other crimes. And it's just an avalanche. Every year it's more and more and more, and they're just going to be building prisons for the indefinite future if we don't find a way to finally get some dialogue, some discussion about whether or not this is wise policy. And it's one of our goals that we encourage that.
Very good. I know that for some of our viewers who know that we've covered this issue at some length, but by way of refreshing, it's projected in the next 10 years, or a little less than that perhaps, Iowa's prison population is going to go from 7,000 to 14,000. It's going to double, and we're going to need 7 new prisons in the next decade as well. Incredible increase in those numbers. Currently, there is a commission meeting, a sentencing reform commission, Ben, on that topic. What can we expect from that? Do you anticipate that we're going to get a handle on any of this through that commission?
Well, the Civil Liberties Union does attend those sentencing commission meetings. Our lobbyist, Marty Ryan, goes to those on a regular basis, and it's hard to say what they're going to do. There's hope that at least they're looking at it, and if they're serious about reform, they're hearing a lot of information about the lack of effectiveness of the way that we're doing things. And there's an interest in reducing sentences for nonviolent offenses, and Paul, hopefully getting rid of the 85% rule, which requires that under certain crimes, people convicted of certain crimes must serve 85% of their sentences. And of course, the meth law is another example of, you know, the dealing meth to a minor is a 99-year prison term. Those kind of excesses are just ridiculous. I mean, there's another thing we need to realize, and that is that this war on drugs, as we said earlier, I mean, it's really impacting the minority community. You know, the minority community across the country, blacks are 13% of the drug users, according to surveys, monthly drug users, 13%. However, 35% of those arrested for drug crimes are African American. 55% of those convicted of drug crimes are African American, and 65% of those of the people in prison are African American for drug crimes. So I mean, the racist aspects of the system, and we've heard recently a study here in Iowa that 1 out of 12 persons in this state who are of color, or I think it's actually African Americans, are in the criminal justice system. And I know nationwide that there's a tremendous, the number, 1 out of 3 African American men between the ages of 20 and 29 are in the criminal justice system in this country. And that's just intolerable. We need to find a way to deal with this problem of drugs. And you know, drug prohibition, which is really what it is. I mean, we had alcohol prohibition. We know it's failed. We repealed the amendment. And drug prohibition, the way to deal with drugs is to have effective regulation and effective prevention and education. And our politicians just are not even, I mean, Iowa's going the wrong way. I mean, other states are starting to decriminalize some of the marijuana possessions, and Iowa's just going the other way.
So how do you think we're doing in terms of substance abuse treatment and the like in Iowa? I mean, we have this real interest to incarcerate people that get involved with illegal drugs. In terms of other approaches to addressing this, you're suggesting some sort of regulatory effort. What about the treatment in folks that have substance abuse issues?
Well, I think it's been well documented that it's very much below what it needs to be. There was a bill, there were 2 bills on methamphetamine in the legislature, basically. One of them was this very harsh 99-year enhanced penalty, and the other one dealt with prevention and some funding. But from what I've heard from media sources, that those monies are really quite paltry compared to what the needs are. And I mean, my clients in the criminal justice system, there's waiting lists, they can't get in. They sit in jail, they languish in jail without treatment. And there's, the states, Arizona is one state that has had a very successful program thus far that every person who's a first-time offender for a nonviolent drug crime is given treatment, every single one of them. And there's a series of, they got like 3 or 4 chances to fail urinalysis tests. And it's something that we need to start looking at here in the state of Iowa.
I'm on the Health and Human Rights Budget Subcommittee, and we saw presentations this last legislative session on substance abuse spending and the increase from community-based agencies, and we've seen a substantial increase in the number of people they're seeing, but we haven't increased, the state support to those organizations has not increased in a very long time, and they're doing a lot of more with a lot less. They're really tough shape. Getting back to the driving while black issue, what specific suggestions would the ICLU have for Iowa about that? I know in Iowa City, our police chief just recently decided we would collect statistics on this, and I thought that was a fairly proactive approach.
Yes, that's very good.
Are there any other cities doing that, and what should we be doing on this?
Well, that's the main first step. I mean, besides just acknowledging that it's a problem, we need statistics. Can I tell you definitively that driving while black or racial profiling is a problem in Iowa? I can't tell you. I know from anecdotal evidence that I'm confident that it happens, but to be able to convince the legislature that there needs to be something done, we need to gather statistics, and law enforcement agencies in the state are not required, by and large, to collect statistics on the race of the people they pull over and the race of the people that they ask to search. And that's the first step, and we're anticipating we'll be able to get a bill sponsored in the next legislative session, and there's been a federal bill that actually made it out of committee that requires statistical analysis of racial issues, and some of the statistics we do have came out because of lawsuits brought by the ACLU in New Jersey and Maryland. And there's been a lot of, New Jersey State Police have had to admit that it happens, and it's more than just a few rogue police officers. So that's the first step, is getting a statistical bill. We're also working with the Immigrant Rights Network to encourage people of ethnic backgrounds to contact organizations and hopefully channel information to a central location to collect data on what has happened to Hispanics and others. So collecting information is really the first step, so that we can have credibility when we go to public policymakers and tell them that it is a problem. It's not something you can just, it's kind of similar to the civil rights movement. It really took bringing hard data to people to make them finally realize that, look, this is Iowa and it can happen here.
Good. You're watching Iowa News and Views. We're a little bit past halfway through the show. We have a web page, and we're going to give you that address right now. Check it out. We've got information about the show, upcoming shows, past shows. We'd like your ideas on guests, and if you want to be a guest, send us an email. Here's our email address. We appreciate all the email we get, and we'd like to get some email from you real soon. My mailbox is just waiting for it to arrive. I'll get home tonight and take a look at it. Our guest this evening is Ben Stone. He's the Executive Director of the Iowa Civil Liberties Union. He's also a defense attorney and an instructor teaching constitutional law at DMAC over in the Des Moines area. We appreciate you being here, Ben. We've been talking about the war on drugs and driving while black. One of the issues you raised was the issue of how this is focused on poor people, not only people of color, but on poor folks. How does that show up for people?
It's really, I think, one of the greatest secrets that this state has, that the way the criminal justice system has been changed in the last 10 years, the way it affects people who don't have much income and who get accused and charged with crimes. I mean, people probably don't realize, in Iowa, if you are, well, one thing I should say first off is that there was an amendment to the Iowa Constitution last fall, and it passed. And that eliminated the $100 cap on simple misdemeanor fines. The Iowa legislature has since changed a lot of statutory definitions and made serious misdemeanors now simple misdemeanors. And they've essentially left the fines at a higher level. So now people can be charged with simple misdemeanors. The general simple misdemeanor statute says that a simple misdemeanor is between $100 and $500. And so what that means, it's kind of technical, but what it means is that people, before the amendment was changed, people would always have an attorney, court appointed, to represent them if they were indigent for anything over $100, because there was a statutory requirement that anybody charged with a serious misdemeanor has the right to counsel. Now that they've redefined these crimes, people can face $500 fines and they have no right to a lawyer. And if you're poor, it just creams you. I mean, these people are all going to plead guilty. They have no lawyer. And on top of the $500 is a 30% surcharge. So you tack on 30% there. They have to pay court fees. And even if they're acquitted, Iowa law requires that they pay for their court-appointed attorney fees after the fact. As a court-appointed attorney, I'm paid by the state. I send in my bill to the state then bills the defendant. Whether the defendant is acquitted, whether the charges are dismissed, it doesn't matter, they pay that. And these people are poor. When I had a client the other day, she had nothing more than basically the clothes on her back. She'd been evicted, her clothes, all of her things had been taken, her truck had been impounded, she had nothing. And another thing that happens now is that not only did they raise the specter of people being facing criminal charges with high fines without an attorney, they've now made it mandatory that all Class D felonies are a $1,000 mandatory penalty, and all Class C felonies are $2,000. And when you have someone who's in front of the judge who is absolutely destitute, it's really ridiculous to throw these fines out. What happens is people can't pay the fines, or they make an effort and they can't fulfill their obligation, and then they get held in contempt of court, and then they go to jail where they pay more jail rent. We have jail rent in Iowa where you can be charged between $40 and $60, sometimes $70 a day as rent for being in jail. So you can't pay the fine, you go to jail because you can't pay the fine, and then you get a jail rent charge on top, and it's a piling on. And the people that start out in the criminal justice system who are poor, it's almost impossible for them to ever get out from underneath it. And these people are going to end up back in prison on the public dole with people that state taxpayers paying for them, and it's destroying the lives of their families, their kids. It is really profound the way that our criminal justice system just attacks poor people. It really is a travesty that we need to be more aware of.
One of the other issues you raised was some of the laws that have recently been passed in Iowa, the methamphetamine bill, but within that bill there was some additional language about possession of any illegal drug. You would get 2 days, upon a conviction, you get 2 days in jail, or probation and drug testing.
Required random drug testing.
Okay.
For marijuana possession.
Okay. Yeah, I know in Johnson County, our county attorney has suggested it's going to take an additional 3 beds a day we're going to fill up in our jail as a result of that. In terms of looking at the future, this sentencing commission, are we going to address questions like that through this reform, do you think? Whether that's a prudent policy decision or not?
The main question about the sentencing commission is it a serious effort to, I think, provide political cover to the legislature to make changes that were recommended by a body of policy thinkers to say, well, they think this is a good idea, we should implement it, and that would hopefully insulate them from some political attacks they might get for, you know, being soft on crime.
Right.
If that's not going to happen, if it's not going to be a vehicle to provide kind of an unbiased justification for changing the criminal justice system, I don't have much hope. There will certainly be some changes made, but I think what matters are the people on the commission, particularly the politicians. How serious are they at actually addressing the problems that our criminal justice system is creating for our society? Or how much of it is that they know that because people don't understand the issues, they don't watch public access TV enough, that they can just keep on the status quo and get reelected. So that's really, I think, it's hard to say. I talk to different people on this commission, and you get different stories. It's hard to know. We just have to hope and monitor and encourage debate and get information to them, and hopefully they'll respond with sincerity.
Sure. Well, one of the issues I think driving this is the sheer cost of all these penalties we've put on the books. I mean, I think everybody wants safe communities, and including the ICLU. And how do we get that? And what's the balancing of the costs? And we're not going to have any money in this state to do anything to deal with health care, crumbling schools, child care, any of those issues on the course we're on with the prison costs and the operation costs of prisons. It's going to take every red cent we have.
It's going to gobble it up, yeah. It's something that our policymakers get information about the ineffectiveness of this, and it's not cost effective, it's not deterrent, it doesn't work, and until the public is aware of that and can help their legislators realize, look, you don't have to do all these stupid laws and enhancing, you don't just lock everybody up because it doesn't work, it's too expensive, we can't do other things, until there's kind of a groundswell. I mean, people like us can tell legislators things, they don't care. It's what their constituents think. So the listeners, the viewers of this program need to communicate with their legislators that the war on drugs needs to be examined seriously for other alternatives, because it's just going to gobble up our state budget and really make it so we can't do the things that we should be able to do in the 21st century.
Sure. Viewers, that would also include tax cuts, by the way. We won't have money for tax cuts if we have to fund all these prisons and the cost of operating these prisons. Ben, we're getting down to the last 4 or 5 minutes here. What other issues do you see in the next year for your organization?
Well, in terms of legislation, viewers may be aware of an effort in the last legislature to make it possible to randomly urine test high school students. The town of Maquoketa was the main force behind that effort to change the law, and there was a bill introduced and it never made it to the floor for debate. That bill will be back. Since that bill was defeated last year, the 8th Circuit, which is the circuit Iowa is in, the federal circuit, has issued a ruling that has said that the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution does not protect students in the 8th Circuit from random drug tests, and that includes students in the chess club, French club. I mean, it's not just athletics. So the only thing stopping towns like Maquoketa from implementing urine testing for students is Iowa Code 808A, which is a statute that we helped get passed in the 1980s that says that students cannot be searched unless there is individualized reasonable suspicion. So that will be a focal point of our efforts in the next legislature. We need a lot of people who believe in the right to privacy to communicate that with their legislators. Other issues that come out is we've got some church and state cases developing. I can't go into any details on those, but there's a funding of private parochial schools through a bonding process that we're examining. There's also a situation involving a teaching of creationism issue that's developing. So those are 2 cases that we're closely monitoring, and you know, we've got there's all kinds of issues involving free speech. We just filed a lawsuit earlier this week involving, actually last week, in Davenport. It's kind of related to the war on drugs. A couple is interested in passing out flyers at the Bix Festival describing how Bix Beiderbecke was a user of marijuana and that his jazz contemporaries were all users, and that they believed that marijuana was an enhancement to their ability as a jazz musician. And the Davenport police threatened to arrest them for distributing these flyers within the Bix Festival. So we've filed a First Amendment lawsuit on that case against the city of Davenport. You know, the city of Davenport is really doing a disservice to keep information from people and their guests and their citizens about an issue as important as the war on drugs. So, you know, we defend all speech if it's got merit in terms of time, place, and manner. But those are some of the issues we're working on.
Interesting.
You know, we're always doing the best we can to. You know, I should mention that the Iowa Civil Liberties Union is one of the oldest affiliates in the country. We were founded in 1935. We're a membership organization. We're funded entirely by private money. We do not get any government money unless we win a case, and then they pay our attorney fees in the federal court. But it's membership. It's people giving us donor money, and we don't take any government money. People often think we're a government agency. We sue the government. We're not the government agencies that people have. So it's important that people realize that the Iowa Civil Liberties Union is there for them, and I do believe it's an organization worthy of support.
We're down to about our last minute, Ben. I appreciate you being here. Any position on the Ten Commandments and their ability to stop gun violence?
Yeah, that's a good one. The Ten Commandments bill absolutely outraged our members, our board. I mean, emails coming in. I mean, people just, what in the world is going on? You know, I think that it points out that the people in the Congress really are just so beholden to a lot of special interests that they're just not interested in real solutions. And you know, it doesn't have any force in law. It's really symbolic. It's ludicrous. The Supreme Court has already ruled that placing the Ten Commandments in schools is unconstitutional. So there's really no question about that. But it's really unfortunate they can't be more serious about the solutions we need for this country.
Very good. Ben, thanks for being with us. Ben Stone, the Executive Director of the Iowa Civil Liberties Union, our guest this evening. Thanks for joining us. I'd like to thank the crew for always doing the hard work, our financial contributors, and of course you, our viewers, for tuning in. A lot to think about. I encourage you to study up on the whole issues, all these issues surrounding the war on drugs. We've talked about some of those this evening. There's some substantial costs involved. We hope to see you again next time. Remember, this is just a TV program, and what's important is what you're doing in your community each and every day to make it a better place. We'll see you next time.